The whole around 1400 hours of program is available in any Reliance Web World in 250 locations in the country. Even if you have joined only for the MCQ, I mean Sunday test program also, what you can do is you can selectively listen whatever the topic that you require. Actually we did a short analysis. There is totally around 450 hours of program for the 20 subjects that we have developed, and most of the students are attending. Honestly, everybody do not require 450 hours of every subject, because naturally you will be good in some subjects, you do not require everything. But because this is a LCD based projection, inevitably you have to sit with anybody else whether you like or not, but still students are bearing it for the past 5 years. So now the question is, you can be selective, you can simply sit, decide, okay, I want to listen only acid based disturbances, that's all. So that even your money is conserved, right? You need not waste so much of money for attending for the program which is unnecessary for you as an individualized outlook. That's the reason this will help you to basically strategize yourself whichever subject you want. You can also bookmark those topics. Everybody will have their own account. So last 45 days I want to listen this topic means you can bookmark there. Only those topics quickly you can listen selectively in the last moment, and there is around past 10 years of around 6,500 MCQ subject wise discussion is also present over there. Everything like a lecture, click and then listen. And around 75 full scale tests that we conducted in the past 1.5 years are also there. You can take like an online test and also listen to the 3 hours of lecture of that. So from this week onwards, whatever the test that happens on Sunday, automatically next night, that day night itself become hosted in the Bombay server. So 250 web worlds in the country will immediately answer it next day. So you will have a rank in accordance to your center, Reliance Web World of that locality, across the country, across the state, so many things. So it is only a beginning, as Winston Churchill said after winning the war. So it was a dream that we had been relishing for past 1.5 years. When. So finally we are able to make it for a better advantage. Especially housemanship means time is a precious commodity. That's the reason more focused preparation is required. So let us continue with the discussion, Doctor. Paul-Bert effect, what is the meaning of it? The oxygen toxicity in the lungs with a high PO2 levels is basically called the Paul-Bert effect. Typically leads to a restrictive pattern rather than a obstructive pattern of lung disease is what need to be remembered. Now let's go to the next question. A spongy mass which has got a sunburst like calcification in the center is seen in which lesion in the pancreas? Pancreatic cyst is honestly speaking MS general surgery 3rd year topic, not a MBBS final year passed out topic, but still we need to be doubly sure. You have mucinous cystic neoplasms of the pancreas which are uncommon. They can be benign like the serous cystadenomas, they can be inflammatory like the pseudocysts, or they can be malignant also. So there are different types of cystic lesions in pancreas. Typically this is the ultrasound done through the left hypochondrium. Left hypochondrium, what you will have? Tail of pancreas. You are able to see a mass lesion over here which has got a septum here. So a septate mass which is anterior to the kidney is what you are able to see here. So what are the differential diagnosis of this kind of cystic lesion in the pancreas? It can be a pancreatic pseudocyst, serous cystadenoma, pancreatic abscess. A very important syndrome called von Hippel-Lindau syndrome also has got cystic lesions in the kidney, cystic lesions in the liver, and also in the pancreas is what need to be remembered. So von Hippel-Lindau, one of the favorite topics for the examiner, it is the autosomal dominant condition. CNS, genitourinary system, liver, spleen, pancreas, adrenals. You find the presence of the cystic lesions is what need to be remembered. And which type of cystadenoma? Serous or mucinous cystadenoma of the pancreas is associated with the von Hippel-Lindau, a potential question. We need to remember it is the mucinous cystadenoma, microcystic cystadenoma, that is otherwise called serous cystadenoma, is the one which is associated with the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome is what need to be basically remembered. So now the question is, where do you come across the typical features that is given by the examiner? Typically in the serous cystadenoma, if you happen to take a CT abdomen, you come across a typical appearance with a central calcification with innumerable cysts within the mass, which is the typical appearance of a serous cystadenoma of the pancreas is what you need to basically remember. What is the other name given for the serous cystadenoma of the pancreas? It is also called microcystic adenoma is the other name given. So it is not the mucinous cystadenoma, rather it is the serous cystadenoma where this typical appearance on the CT is found, is what I like to finally conclude for all of you. Now let's go to the next question. Pituitary apoplexy is typically associated with what? Very simple. Whenever there is a ischemia to the pituitary, it will undergo the necrosis which is called the pituitary apoplexy. So what is the cause for it? Suddenly postpartum lot of bleeding is there that can lead to hypotension, which will lead to the ischemia of the pituitary, leading to development of apoplexy. Otherwise called Sheehan syndrome, which is the postpartum pituitary apoplexy. Similarly, any arteriosclerosis that you come across in diabetes or hypertension also can cause ischemia to the pituitary. Hence hypertension and diabetes also are the risk factors. Similarly, sickle cell disease like conditions which increase the viscosity of the blood and predispose to a prothrombotic state also can lead to the development of ischemia of pituitary, leading to apoplexy, is what we need to basically remember. So the predisposing factors for a pituitary apoplexy are any bromocriptine therapy, head trauma, pregnancy, irradiation of pituitary, and even sometimes endocrine stimulation tests if you do very aggressively, that also can lead to the development of pituitary apoplexy, is what need to be remembered. How do you recognize this apoplexy? Headache, visual symptoms, altered mental status will be there in a patient, and sometimes if there is a known case of pituitary adenoma, there can be bleeding into the adenoma, which also can cause sudden appearance of pituitary apoplexy. So adenoma is also a risk factor for the pituitary apoplexy, is what I want to underscore to all of you. So there is a classical example where in the pituitary you are able to see there is a hemorrhage into this macroadenoma, which is increasing its intensity on scanning. So on MRI is a typical appearance of how a bleed into the pituitary adenoma can lead to development of pituitary apoplexy, is what need to be remembered. Headache is the most common symptom of the pituitary apoplexy, is what need to be remembered. Now what are the complications of diabetes? Most important, we should remember, there is an entity called emphysematous pyelonephritis. There is appearance of bubbles within the kidney, the pelvic area of the kidney if you do the ultrasound. So which is called emphysematous pyelonephritis. If you have a diabetic patient admitted under you, diagnosed to have emphysematous pyelonephritis, you must be doubly sure that it is a visa to the heaven, that is it is a almost synonymous with mortality. So you must take a very good care to give good antibiotics, carefully monitor the patient. Sometimes suddenly they go into a septicemic state and then pop out. That's the reason, doctor, emphysematous pyelonephritis is almost a life-threatening scenario, is what need to be remembered. Are the options are the same or any different? Similarly, is it not or not only? No, that's what I'm saying. So emphysematous pyelonephritis is definitely a life-threatening scenario. There is an entity called malignant otitis externa caused by the Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is seen in the diabetic individuals and also HIV positive individuals, which is also capable of causing the mortality. And also you are having, this is the typical appearance, this is the normal kidney, this is the kidney affected with pyelonephritis. You can see the air fluid levels over here, which is indicative of that bubble forming organism infection of the kidney. And sometimes if emphysematous pyelonephritis is there, you need to resect it, is what need to be remembered. There's a reason, doctor, emphysematous appendicitis, I am not very sure is it existent or not, but definitely pyelonephritis, otitis externa and rhinocerebral mucormycosis, they are all basically synonymous with life-threatening scenarios in diabetes, is what need to be basically remembered. Now let's go to the next question. Comprehensive emergency obstetrics care. This is there is something commonness between these coaching centers and our what you call policy makers of health. Why? Both of them are very good in creating some terminology. NEON is a very short-term preparation for All India Engineering entrance. So similarly, you have some crayon, some aspire, so some such FTP, ATP, ETP, excellent, I mean wonderful terms. In fact, we kept one small competition for all our managers. Give some wonderful name where we don't put any content, also students will enroll for the program. So you can also contribute for that. So similarly, our health caretakers, comprehensive emergency obstetrics. How can emergency can become comprehensive? That means there is a non-comprehensive emergencies also we can invite in our life. So there are two types, doctor. Basic emergency obstetric care, BEMOC it is called as, and comprehensive emergency obstetric care called CEMOC. When my examiner failed my MD final exam, my professor was saying that, are you really bothered? Then immediately we said, no, why bother, sir? We have students outside the medical college, we have lot of work to do. Anyway, 6 months later, you will naturally pass me. Until then, I can keep a title, Fellow of Association of Failed Physicians. FAFP is what I will place after MBBS. After you give the MD degree, we will keep MD. So also, you have two different terminology here. Now, what are the components of BEMOC? You have parenteral administration of antibiotic, anticonvulsant, oxytocin, assisted vaginal delivery, manual removal of placenta and retained products of conception, removal. They are all the part of the BEMOC, which need to be available for every population of 1.25 lakh areas. Then CEMOC is delivered for every 5 lakh population they require. If 5 lakh population is there, there must be blood transfusion facility and availability of the blood, more important, more than the blood bank. Then facility for cesarean section for delivery of the fetus in emergency cases must be there, which is a component of your comprehensive emergency obstetric care. In addition to all the services provided by the BEMOC also is what need to be remembered. So, out of all this, doctor, transfusion must be there, and also removal of placenta is there, cesarean section is there, but hysterectomy is not a component of this comprehensive care is what need to be basically remembered. Now ASHA, this is a very standard question in the entrance, that nearly around 50 questions are repeated between past 6 months and now. So accredited social health activist ASHA, what is she expected to bring the great hope in the villages, doctor? Universal immunization, escort services for the RCH and referral, and she is expected to know the pedagogy of the public health, and she need to also deliver lectures how to have a wonderful living in the villages. And also she need to train the Anganwadi workers, and one upman as Rani Rudrama Devi, she must be guiding the village activists. The ASHA is expected to be, but ASHA is not expected to become a skilled birth attendant. That work is done by different group of people. So that's the reason all the remaining things she can do, but not A is what we need to know. Now let's go to the next question. Infective endocrinitis with Pseudomonas etiology. Which subset of population are more likely to develop this? We need to remember, doctor, the most common cause of infective endocrinitis, frequent question, Staphylococcus aureus is what need to be remembered. Mortality is very high. And if you take the nosocomial blood-borne infective endocrinitis, then what is the status of Staph aureus is the second most common cause to the nosocomial infective endocrinitis, second only to the first. Who is the first? Coagulase negative staphylococci. Now coming to, there is an entity called polymicrobial infective endocarditis. Especially Pseudomonas and Enterococci are very notorious to cause this polymicrobial infective endocarditis. In this subset, especially intravenous drug abuser infective endocarditis it is called. Typically Pseudomonas is a very important organism implicated is what need to be remembered. Now let's go to the next question. Clubbing, whether it is third year MBBS or third year MD, it is a very important question. You need to be doubly sure. You have pulmonary causes, cardiac causes like cyanotic congenital heart disease, and any right to left shunting and bacterial endocarditis also can cause the clubbing is what need to be remembered. There's a reason, doctor, tricuspid atresia, which is a cyanotic or acyanotic heart disease. T for tricuspid atresia, truncus arteriosus, transposition of great vessels, and tetralogy of Fallot. These four are basically called cyanotic. So that's the reason clubbing is invariably there. Similarly, fungal endocarditis and pulmonary AV fistulas also can lead to development of the clubbing is what need to be remembered. Solitary rectal ulcer, a very important entity. Let us talk about it, doctor. What is seen in the histology of it? Is it discussed in Bailey and Love? I am not very sure. Is the answer is there in Bailey? You know, I mean, it was long time that we used to read Bailey daily, but I could not find the answer in this. But anyway, I'll give you the answer for this. This is a typical colonoscopic appearance of how a solitary rectal ulcer typically appears, doctor. It can present with bleeding, passage of mucus, straining during defecation, and a sense of incomplete evacuation are the common clinical presenting features of solitary rectal ulcer. Now tell me, what is the second important Common question asked in the entrance. Where is it located? Anterior rectum or posterior? You must be doubly sure. Anterior rectal wall, 85% of case it is seen. More common in females, it occurs in pediatric and adults also, but mean age is 40 is what need to be remembered. Now, if you happen to take the histology of a solitary rectal ulcer, that's what exactly examiner asked. What are the features? Superficial ulcerations will be there. There will be villiform surface with reactive epithelia and commonly mistaken for villous adenoma which is ulcerated. Hence, we need to be doubly careful. If you attend any surgical clinico-pathological conference in post-graduation, villous adenoma versus solitary rectal ulcer is one of the common differential diagnosis on which people struggle a lot. But what is very important feature is, there is a prominent fibrous and smooth muscle proliferation in the lamina propria is a very classical feature in the case of the solitary rectal ulcer. In fact, those smooth muscle bands which have a streaming quality, which are perpendicular to the muscularis mucosae, is a classical feature, characteristic feature, which differentiates the solitary rectal ulcer from any other closest DD. What is the closest DD? Villous adenoma you need to basically differentiate it from. And another common DD is inflammatory bowel disease versus solitary rectal ulcer you need to differentiate. Unlike the inflammatory bowel disease where inflammation is seen, in solitary rectal ulcer in histology inflammation is not seen, is another important differentiating feature. Another thing is dysplastic changes which are seen in a adenoma are not seen in the case of solitary rectal ulcer, so you need to be doubly sure about. So haphazardly arranged benign colonic crypts surrounded by the fibroblasts and the smooth muscle proliferation, and typically the crypts which appear elongated and diamond shaped, and the wavy appearance of that submucosal muscular proliferation is a classical feature, is what need to be remembered. So that's the reason. What is the answer, doctor? A band of collagen which is like a stream which is wavy is a classical feature in the case of the solitary rectal ulcer, is what need to be basically remembered. Now let's go to the next question. Water hammer pulse. Without a question on the valvular heart disease in cardiology, we can't cross the entrance game, doctor. Anyway, there are hardly 4 chambers, 4 valves, 1 stenosis, 1 regurgitation. Luckily there is nothing else which is possible there. Lateral way there are no lesions, only up and down they are there. So where do you come across water hammer? Typically in aortic regurgitation. When the pulse is bounding and forceful, it is typically hitting of a water hammer that is causing the pulse. With a widened pulse pressure is basically called the water hammers. And in the case of the aortic regurgitation, one more feature, Corrigan's pulse also it's called, is what need to be basically remembered. Now let us talk about endothelin and what is the importance of endothelin. Lot of questions come on this important molecule, doctor. It is a vasoconstricting peptide which contains 21 amino acids. It is important for the vascular hemostasis. Why? It is a powerful vasoconstrictor. It has got 3 different isoforms and 2 different types of receptors called ETA and ETB, endothelin A and B receptor. ETA receptor is found in the smooth muscle tissue of the blood vessel. If it is stimulated, then there is a vasoconstriction and retention of sodium. Whereas ETB is typically present in the endothelial cells in the interior of the blood vessel, and typically if it is stimulated, it will cause a release of the nitric oxide. It causes natriuresis, diuresis and vasodilatation instead of constriction. So it is the same endothelin, but if it is the ETB, it is nitrous oxide release and vasodilatation. If it is ETA, then it is a powerful vasoconstriction for the same endothelin. So generally, doctor, why this endothelin is very important? People get pulmonary hypertension. The underlying culprit is endothelin is what they discovered. There is more endothelin leading to pulmonary vasoconstriction, leading to pulmonary hypertension. So how can you treat pulmonary hypertension, doctor? The common drug which is given for pulmonary hypertension and also for impotence, what is the drug? Sildenafil is even used for that also, even pulmonary hypertension also. So in the pulmonary hypertension patients, we can use the drugs like the sitaxanthin, which is a blocker of the endothelin A receptor, which will inhibit the vasoconstrictive action of the endothelin and helps in the vasodilatation, which will relieve the pulmonary hypertension. That is the reason, doctor, we need to remember about the endothelin. And is there any role for endothelin in bronchi? Definitely, endothelin is also capable of causing bronchodilation. So vasoconstriction is a function, bronchodilation is also a function. It is not a decreased GFR, it is an increased GFR, and natriuresis is the function of the ETB receptor, is what you need to Emphatically remember. Now let's go to the next question, doctor. What happens in isometric exercise? Basically the systemic vascular resistance will try to decrease because exercise will induce the vasodilatation of all the vessels going to the muscles, which grossly will cause the vascular resistance to come down, is what need to be remembered. Otherwise the arterial pressure will increase, mean value, cardiac output will increase, and heart rate also will increase. Now in hepatic failure, which muscle relaxant that you can use? Cisatracurium typically depends on Hoffman's degradation for its elimination, not on the liver. Hence in liver failure patients also we can give the cisatracurium, is what need to be basically remembered. Now let us talk about the digoxin. What is the difference between digoxin and digitoxin, doctor? One is liver, other is kidney. So that is the reason, doctor, digoxin is basically affected by, digitoxin is affected by the liver and cholestatic disease, but not digoxin, is what need to be remembered. Now what are the drugs which are, what are the conditions where digitalis toxicity can happen? Hypokalemic state, and similarly any renal failure patients, if there is any acute MI, sometimes digoxin can play a counter role. So these are all the important areas where you must be careful to give the digoxin. In type 1 diabetes, what is the most common congenital abnormality? What was the recent question in the state entrance? Rarest congenital abnormality is the second spectrum. So neural tube defects are the ones which are commonly seen out of all, is what need to be remembered. 60-year-old man has TURP. Later on he developed altered sensorium because of the hyponatremia. So why does hyponatremia occur? Because the glycine, sorbitol, mannitol, which are used in the TURP, can predispose to the development of the hyponatremia, is what need to be remembered. Now in hepatocellular carcinoma, which is a very important tumor marker, all of us know that it is the alpha fetoprotein which is implicated. Now you have something else, PIVKA2, just like any entrance coaching program title. So what is this, doctor? PIVKA2. Yes, proteins which are formed in the vitamin K's absence is called PYKA2. Typically, doctor, in those who are having the liver disease, the PIVKA2, if it is a malignant liver disease like hepatocellular carcinoma, they become elevated, but benign liver diseases do not cause the PIVKA2 to increase, is what need to be basically remembered. Now neurotensin is a very important protein. Why is it so important in hepatocellular carcinoma? There are two types of hepatocellular carcinoma. One is called fibrolamellar variant of hepatocellular carcinoma, and other is the traditional hepatocellular carcinoma. How do you differentiate between the two? It is this neurotensin which is expressed in the fibrolamellar carcinoma, but not in the case of the regular variety of hepatocellular carcinoma, which will differentiate. You also have another protein called desgamma carboxyprothrombin. So desgamma carboxyprothrombin and neurotensin are produced only in the fibrolamellar, but not in the case of the regular variety of the hepatocellular carcinoma, is what need to be remembered. So there is a reason, I am not very sure can we answer it as neurotensin or not, but definitely alpha 2A globulin is used in the treatment, interferon alpha, but not in the as a tumor marker. So there is a reason D become definite answer, but still neurotensin also stands in prominence because neurotensin is seen in the fibrolamellar variant, but not in the regular variety of the hepatocellular carcinoma, is what need to be remembered. In Krebs cycle, who is the first variant that you come across, doctor? It is the pyruvate, which is the one which become converted into acetyl-CoA, then oxaloacetate, etc., etc. Now Embden-Meyerhoff's pathway, otherwise glycolysis, is the one which you typically see in the cytosol, but not in the case of the mitochondria, as all of you know very well. Now finally the breakdown of glucose into CO2 and water, where does it happen? Only if it passes through citric acid cycle, which happens in the mitochondria, is what need to be remembered. Which is a drug which is used in the decreased mortality and renal failure in alcoholic hepatitis. Very interesting question. Can you tell me, doctor, what is the condition in alcoholic hepatitis where kidney fails and also liver fails, called as HRS, hepatorenal syndrome it is called as. In a case of alcoholic hepatitis, commonly did you not see nephrologist and gastroenterologist seeing the same patient in intensive care unit? Why do they both see the same patient? Same patient has uremia, same patient has alcoholic liver disease also. So without kidney disease, appearance of uremia in a case of alcoholic liver disease is basically defines what is called hepatorenal syndrome. How do you want to avoid that? Pentoxifylline, which is a hemorrhagical agent, it lowers the blood viscosity, it decreases the portal hypertension, and in long term, it is known to decrease the chances of development of hepatorenal syndrome in a patient with alcoholic liver disease. Pentoxifylline also is known to cause inhibitory effect on the tumor necrosis factor. So that is the reason, doctor, it is a wonderful agent to prevent the development of the hepatorenal syndrome is what I want to underscore. Simply next time when you walk into the intensive care unit, you see one of your gastroenterologist prescription. In a case of alcoholic liver disease, severe alcoholic liver disease, pentoxifylline is a part of the prescription in order to avoid the development of the hepatorenal syndrome. Elevated JVP along with the shock means heart is not getting filled. So what conditions prevent the heart from filling? Cardiac tamponade can prevent it. Right ventricular myocardial infarction can prevent the heart from getting filled. So JVP will be prominent with hypotension and also any right heart failure. How about the AV block? AV block of second degree is of two types, Mobitz type 1 and type 2. What is the difference between the two, doctor? In Mobitz type 2, there is a sudden drop of the beat. So that is the reason it is more vulnerable to lead to syncope and other catastrophes. In type 1, what will happen in second degree heart block of Mobitz type 1? Slowly PR interval keep prolonging, at a point of time there is a drop, Wenckebach's phenomena. So in both the conditions, patient is relatively asymptomatic. Only lightheadedness, giddiness, chest pain, such features will be there. But there will not be any elevated JVP like failure features in a case of a simple AV block is what I want to once more underscore. Naloxone is contraindicated in the resuscitation of the mother if she is on which drug? Generally naloxone, if you give, doctor, if somebody is on opioid, suddenly it will antagonize the opioid and they go into a opioid withdrawal phase. That's the reason you don't want to use, which is the, out of this, which drug is antagonizing opioid? Methadone. So that's the reason if the mother is on methadone, naloxone is the one which is not preferable. It can lead to a life-threatening depression of the CNS and respiratory system is what need to be basically remembered. In this context, let us be sure on two important concepts. Naloxone, on which receptor of the opioid does it antagonize? It is the mu receptors. Only on mu receptors it acts on. It also causes a very rapid blockade of mu. That is the reason it induces a sudden withdrawal. And where do you want to use naloxone? Only for the emergency treatment of opioid overdose. It is the one which is commonly used. Now you have a very close twin brother to naloxone called naltrexone. It also acts on the kappa receptors also. It is administered orally. It has a longer duration of action. So if you want to de-addict a patient with opioid, you want to use naloxone on a long-term basis or naltrexone. Naltrexone on a long-term basis. In emergency scenario, it is the naloxone which can be used is what you need to basically remember, and naloxone acts specifically only on the mu receptors is what need to be remembered. This is another important question. Myopathy typically is not a feature of which condition? Now the question is, rickets is a disease of bone. Why should it cause myopathy, disease of the muscle? It can cause. So basically, doctor, myopathy can be of endocrine nature and origin is what need to be remembered. Tell quickly, what are the causes for the endocrine myopathy? Adrenal dysfunction like Cushing's disease or steroids. If you give excessively, one day patient will come, doctor, I am taking a steroid regularly. I am unable to get up from the squatting plate in the toilet. So proximal muscle weakness is a common presentation of steroid myopathy. Similarly, thyroid dysfunction like myxedema coma or thyrotoxic myopathy can be there. Any parathyroid dysfunction as a part of multiple endocrine neoplasia also can lead to the development of myopathy. And any pituitary dysfunction and also diabetic myopathy. So myopathy has 5 important endocrine causes is what need to be remembered. Cushing's is one of the important causes. Then you have an oncogenic osteomalacia, which is a paraneoplastic syndrome where there will be osteomalacia, hypophosphatemia, bone pain and also muscle weakness will be there. So myopathy can be a part of the oncogenic osteomalacia. Now typically which syndromes, which tumors are capable of causing this paraneoplastic oncogenic osteomalacia, doctor? The benign tumors of the mesenchymal origin, sarcomas, are more likely to lead to. Then similarly you have a regular rickets, nutritional osteomalacia. In that also you have the proximal muscle weakness. Then how about the fourth entity, hypophosphatemic rickets, which is also called X-linked hypophosphatemic rickets. There will be a slow growth rate in the first year of life. Patient is unable to bear the weight and there are two features which are very characteristic in a case of X-linked hypophosphatemic rickets. What are they? If they are there, you should suspect the possible diagnosis of hypophosphatemic rickets. Number one, seizures. They should not be there. If they are there, it is unlikely to be a hypophosphatemic rickets. Similarly, the systemic features like muscle dysfunction and myopathy should not be there characteristically. So that is the reason myopathy is absent, rather it is present in the case of oncogenic osteomalacia, nutritional osteomalacia, Cushing's, but not X-linked hypophosphatemic rickets. Do you think it is MBBS level question? DM endocrinology level question, doctor. So no regrets if you don't answer, but still we need to try and strive for it. So let's go to the next question. What is the use of nasotracheal intubation instead of orotracheal intubation, doctor? Naturally, it is a good oral hygiene. You will be less predisposing the oral agents to enter into the lung if there is aspiration. Otherwise, infection, bleeding, displacement in fact is lesser with the nasotracheal than the oral intubation is what need to be remembered. So what are the indications for the nasotracheal, contraindications, limitations? All these are the favorite questions of the examiner. Shortly we will also give you the notes of whatever that is being discussed here. So you can quickly review that. Now in pheochromocytoma, typically what is not done? I don't think FNAC is done. FNAC is not done. So answer should be A. Whereas MRI is done, CT is done, MIBG is done. Out of all, what is the investigation of choice? CT or MRI? Depends on what cut you get from radiologists. More with CT or more with MRI. MRI is the one which can identify adrenal and extra-adrenal pheos also. Whereas CT can generally localize only the adrenal pheos. MIBG is very sensitive, especially for extra-adrenal pheos, is what need to be remembered. But 90% of pheos are there within the adrenal gland, 98% within the abdomen, so abdominal imaging is most important. MRI is preferred over to that of the CT because it has better sensitivity than the CT is what need to be remembered. So this is the typical appearance. There is a normal side kidney, this is the abnormal kidney, there is a mass in the suprarenal gland here which is a contrast enhanced axial CT. In fact, this is a normal kidney, this is the abnormal kidney, and here you are having suprarenal gland which is enlarged. Classical T2 weighted axial MRI in a case of the abdominal pheo is what need to be basically remembered. Now which malignancy is not sensitive to the radiotherapy? Favorite question of the examiner. Wilms tumor. What is the treatment protocol, doctor? You can do nephrectomy followed by chemotherapy with or without post-operative radiotherapy. It is very much radiosensitive. Neuroblastoma, generally patients are older than 1 year with stage 4 tumors if they are having, then such patients need to be treated with chemotherapy and even radiotherapy also. But osteosarcomas are not radiosensitive at all is what need to be remembered. And surgery is the only option for the definitive tumor control. But one problem with the osteogenic sarcoma is there will be micrometastasis which will be going in an intramedullary direction. After resection of the tumor, those micrometastasis can once more relapse. So you want to give post-operative chemotherapy should be added in addition to the surgery in a case of the osteogenic sarcoma is a very important thing that you should not basically forget. Common question asked in the exam. Only surgery or surgery plus chemotherapy you have to be doubly sure. What are the important drug-induced causes for the gynecomastia? Cimetidine, omeprazole, spironolactone, even imatinib mesylate, finasteride-like drug, and once more we have 4 questions from the same list. Drug-induced problems in Harrison's internal medicine, 2 pages will give you 4 marks at least, doctor. So you need to be doubly sure about. Then you are having androstenedione, which is a common drug, which also can cause gynecomastia, etc. Now let us talk about brain natriuretic polypeptide. All of us heard of atrial natriuretic polypeptide. After all, BNP is a bigger brother of ANP. So shortly, quickly get the seat, otherwise CNP, DNP, ENP, everything will come, and from where are they produced, where are they degraded, who will be degrading? It's too many numerical and factual questions, unfortunately. Actually, software developers are more happy guys, you know. They write a program, go for a discotheque, enjoy. They don't need to carry the information brain. Once more they come back and then click, help will come, and they are having ready-made references. Unfortunately, we guys need to remember how much should be the calcium content in ringer lactate, etc., etc. Everything you need to remember. If you don't remember, your colleague will think, this fellow is not confident, I am more confident. This fellow, if he treats, patient is going to die. So character assassination by our own colleagues will be going on. So you need to be doubly sure. Too many facts to remember. Brain's natriuretic peptide typically is a 32 amino acid polypeptide which is once more produced by the not atria, by the ventricles in the heart in response to the stretching of myocytes is what need to be remembered. Typically in acute decompensated congestive heart failure, we can use one of the analogues of this BNP called as the Nesiritide, is nothing but the analog of the BNP used in the congestive heart failure management is what need to be remembered. So what is the secondary messenger of ANP and also BNP? Luckily same messenger is there. Cyclic GMP fellow. What will these do? They will cause natriuresis, vasodilatation, renal inhibition, and anti-mitogenic properties are also there for the ANP and BNP is what need to be remembered. Now who is the one who will be degrading them? It is the neutral endopeptidase, which is expressed in the kidney, lung and vascular wall, is the one which will be breaking down the action of the ANP and BNP. That is what exactly the examiner is asking us. CEA levels other than colon cancer, where else they are elevated? Typically colorectal, gastric, pancreatic, lung and breast cancer, all of them can cause elevated CEA is what need to be remembered in addition to the colorectal cancer. Even non-malignant conditions can cause CEA elevation. What are they? Another favorite question of examiner. Pancreatitis, cirrhosis and even ulcerative colitis also can cause CEA elevation. If you want to measure the intracranial pressure, what is the gold standard available? First of all, let us know what is silver standard, copper standard also available for us. So, neurosurgeons, day in and day out affair, the moment there is a road traffic accident brought, first thing they want to know, how is the intracranial tension? What is the Glasgow coma scale? Shall we operate him or shall we leave him like a cabbage? So you need to be doubly sure. Otherwise, you can't do a wonderful heroic neurosurgery on a Glasgow coma scale 3 or 2 patient. So finally, you will do everything, but patient will die because of already GCS 2 and 3 means almost dead. So first thing before taking up the case, what a neurosurgeon will ask a casualty medical officer, what is the GCS of this patient before I take him up for the surgery? So what are the 3 methods? You have intraventricular catheter, you have a subarachnoid screw or bolt, and if you are very modern gadget, tertiary hospital, epidural sensor also can be there. Intraventricular catheter out of all is the most accurate, and if immediate access is required, then in that scenario subarachnoid bolt also will help is what need to be remembered. For the catheter related infections, what is the most common organism? Coagulase negative staphylococci is the king among the infections leading to catheter related infections. Then you have Enterococcus, Staph aureus, etc. is what need to be remembered. Now neonatal sepsis in India, what are the 2 organisms which are ruling the country? It is the E. coli first and Klebsiella are the 2 important gram-negative organisms leading to neonatal sepsis is what need to be remembered. What is the most frequent nerve used in a perioperative monitoring? I am not sure which operation it is, because is it defined? So what I am thinking, possibly the question is, while you are operating a patient, you want to know whether muscle relaxant activity is adequate or not. For that there is something called somatosensory evoked potentials which are used to determine the degree of efficacy of muscle relaxants. In that case, the answer would be the median nerve stimulation is the one which is commonly used nerve for assessing the SSEP in the perioperative phase. But I am not sure what examiner is exactly asking. Even ulnar can be an equally good answer. For testing facial nerve, orbicularis oris is the one which is generally chosen. Which cell does not migrate and come at the apex of the crypt of the small intestine? Then what is the meaning of it? Which is the one which is starting from the apex of the crypt and going to the bottom instead of, so that is one sentence in the book that is being converted into a question by IELTS or TOEFL expert. So Paneth cells migrate downward towards the base of the crypt. All the other cells will go from base towards the apex is what need to be remembered. Too complex. Now, which is not an essential amino acid, at least a homely question. So phenylalanine, leucine, methionine, lysine, isoleucine, all of you know very well. PV Hiltmalt, they are the group of essential amino acids. 125 dihydroxy vitamin D, a little relief in while writing entrance, at least some questions we know are also given in the exam. So that is a most active form. Now this is a very interesting question. Anybody who answered need not read the topic of congenital adrenal hyperplasia in their life. Doctor, is it 21 or 17 or 11? What is your answer? Anyway, you know very well, there are broadly 2 groups of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. What are they? Salt losing, salt retaining. hypertensive, non-hypertensive. Second group, virilizing and non-virilizing is the way that we take into. Out of all congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is the most common type, 21 alpha hydroxylase. All of us know there are two classical features in 21 hydroxylase. What is that? It is virilizing, but it is salt losing. It doesn't cause hypertension. So here there is a hypertension and virilization. So unlikely to be 21 anyway. Now which will cause hypertension? Only two types. 11 and 17 are capable of causing hypertension. Hypertension causing congenital adrenal hyperplasias. Of course, this session is too short. It is like a crash dating. You decide that okay, you like, I like, and let us go for a what you call date kind of discussion. This is because congenital adrenal hyperplasia is like a long silver jubilee topic that you need to celebrate like a marital life. But let us have a crash date about it. If it is 11 beta hydroxylase deficiency, doctor, it is autosomal recessive. Corticosteroid biosynthesis become defective, androgen become excessive, hence there is a virilization, and at the same time there is a development of hypertension also in this. So virilization plus hypertension typically happens in 11 beta hydroxylase deficiency is what need to be basically remembered. How about 21 hydroxylase? It lead to development of the typical virilization very much, but at the same time it is salt wasting. Then you have typically two congenital adrenal hyperplasias which are called hypertensive types, 11 beta and 17. So what is common feature for the two? Suppressed PRA, plasma renin activity, and hypokalemia. They are the two important features of these two groups which are called the hypertensive forms of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So finally let us make peace with this topic, doctor. 11 and 17 is equal to hypertension, right? And virilization is seen with 17 and 21. So virilization is seen with 11 and 21. That's very good. So 17 has what? There is no virilization, but there is hypertension. 21 has virilization plus salt losing, not hypertension. 11 has both hypertension and also salt losing. So both hypertension and also virilization. So at least these three things you must start trying it like a witchcraft on your classmates until you become thorough and perfect enough about them.